not sure how long it's gonna hold. There's warning lights everywhere. Abort! Abort! We've lost comms. Look out. It's out of control.
Yes, it's out of control. Okay, now it's 11:10 p.m. 2022, March 12th, and of course we're just going to start on the 11/11 because the date is what I like to start on at that time. 11:11 p.m. Make a wish with me, folks. Yes, wish for the best, wish for everything. They say you're not supposed to say your wish, but you know what? I believe we all agree that we all want one thing, and that is peace. Now, as I was saying before, I was checking out a few things because I was reading some news, and I felt it's important to share. So I'm hoping that I'm able to share this also with you on the screen, and I was hoping it's showing up. So this is a test, and we're going live. Let's see here. As I did want to get the layout. Let's see. And as always, we're always learning. So, there we go. Share. Okay, and here we are. We are sharing, which is what I wanted to do because sharing is caring. I just want to make sure that I'm able to do it correctly. Okay, we've got it. See. So, as I was talking about propaganda and how, that does make a good way to get folks thinking and washing their minds to adapt to what the status quo wants to tell you all the time. Such in the case as what we see here in television, right? I mean, for decades and decades on, at least since war, and even then, when I would say the industry, right, was created, especially during the Second World War, where there were so many war movies coming out all throughout that whole era, right? Everything, and it was and propaganda because it was right. It was pretty good, right? Because you always definitely wanted the Americans to win, but the way they also developed a lot of those films, we could say were very stereotypical, right? Because it was all like 1 minute. Let's say when the situation in Germany, well, the Germans were the bad guys, right? So we used to see the Americans, and even with the cowboy films, you saw that, right? Everyone was, you know, was fighting each other against the Native Americans and what kind of stereotype. But now, these days, I mean, what's been going on real strong is that we've been softening up and maybe desensitizing ourselves into, accepting, maybe some far right ideologies here and the belief. Because as much as we used to see those movies of good guys, bad guys, as usual, right? It seems that now well, at least for a while, I've seen some shows. There been a lot, some of them were good. I've seen the like Hunters, for example. Yeah, that was very good. I believe it was one season. But then even then, all throughout, even the characters that we've been seeing, there's so much more flesh and meat to them in their character development that you can see throughout decades, right? So now you've seen some. There was one show I saw recently, and it was like they don't, I mean, all of this to say, you can't always believe anything. You cannot, and when I say always, right, I mean, where are you getting this information from and from who, right? I mean, now I'm just trying to find this. It doesn't matter what race you are, right? You could see that there's good guys and bad guys, and really the bad guys are stereotyped in such a way. And it's been continuing like that still for quite some time. But even then, I've noticed that a lot of television's been, and even movies have been, softening these characters that you don't want to whack them right away. You don't want to slap them up the head and say, look, it's wrong that you got that going on in your mind and you want to like, apart from the fact that you killed their parents and whatnot, but now all of a sudden it's like, hey, you want love, you want to have a normal life after everything. So yeah, and other shows of that whole era, and that was one thing I did want to show here. Was a show back in the '70s when I was a kid. And let's see if I have it here. That'd be funny if I didn't. Okay, it was a show called Hogan's Heroes, right? And this was what, during, I think it was the late '60s, if I'm correct, with this guy named Bob Crane. And he wasn't really, I mean, he used to do some films for Disney. That, I remember, I was like a child back then. And he used to do some, Disney used to have these, I would say, teenage TV movies that went in part ones and twos, and they were pretty cool. One of them, I believe, was, if I could recall, was the strongest. But it did the strongest boy on the earth. I'll take a type into it, but it was with Kurt Russell, and they were teenagers back in the day, right? So this was one of those, big. That was the big cool thing at the time. Pretty much like I guess what happened with maybe well, has there like great actors like hmm, Ryan Gosling, I think, would be a good example, right? Because Kurt was that guy at that time, that young kid who came out of the Disney world, and but he used to, yeah, he did a few films, and one of them was the strongest. I think it was the strongest man. I'm gonna look it up in a sec. But Bob Crane was in a few of these Disney productions. One of them was called Super Dad. That was, I think, another one. He drank a potion and middle-aged guy, and so anyway, he was a favorite when this show Hogan's Heroes came up, right? Uh, it was popular, and it was one of those shows that, like I said, softened folks up, right, about the war. And this is what, okay, so, all right, so this was what year? Okay, Cochrane Enterprises. So this guy, yeah, he had something, yeah, September 17th, 1965 to March 28th, 1971. Right? So this was, yeah, it was 20 years after the Second World War. So that's already into the generation of kids that were growing up and all of that. So by then, all the heavy war films were pretty much chilling out, and now they were doing sitcoms. And this was one of the, if I'm correct. I mean, you had others like Sergeant Bilko and Petticoat Junction, if I'm correct, and as comedies and McHale's Army or McHale's Navy. My bad. See, Hogan's Heroes is an American television sitcom set in Nazi German prisoner of war (POW) camp during World War II. Yeah, so that's where it was set, and it ran for 168 episodes, 6 seasons, from the dates I aforementioned, September 17th, 1965, to April 4th, 1971, on this network here. There's some interesting stories about this place. Let's just take a quick peek, because they were around also since a lot of the era, and they did have some pretty amazing. I would say in the most positive way, because nowadays we speak of the legacy media as not as truthful as what it was back in these days, right? So, but then we did hear there were connections to how information was coming out all throughout the, well, maybe not the Second World War, but definitely like what was happening in Vietnam and all throughout. So anyway, they produced Hogan's Heroes. So Bob Crane starred as Colonel Robert E. Hogan, coordinating an international crew of Allied prisoners running a special operations group from the camp. Werner Klemperer played Colonel Wilhelm Klink, the gullible commandant of the camp, and John Banner, remember him, for us Gen Xers, at most maybe even Gen Ys, because I think that show ran for a minute, right? Maybe even still around, but yeah, he played blundering but lovable Sergeant of the Guard Hans Schultz, right? I'm laughing because, when we think of it today, right? And everything that's going on today, right? March 12th, 2022, at 11:24 p.m., the world's tripping, we're bringing back all these old demons and we're talking about, like, once again, the past, right? The past now is a new thing, right? You hear about these right-wing extremists and the rhetoric going around, and here you are, boom, ba-da-dum, you know, blundering but lovable, gullible. Come on down to the crown, the calm. So yeah, let's read it a little bit more. So the plot occurs, because over here we see there are experts. The pitch. The plot occurs during the permanent winter season in a fictionalized Stalag 13, right? It was a German Army World War II prisoner of war camp, Stammlager, built on what would have been the training camp at. So, they're basing this on a training camp. Just outside Hammelburg in Nazi Germany, though details of the show are inconsistent with the real life camp and the city's location in Francona. One episode anchors away Men of Stalag 13, for instance, mentions the camp being located 60 miles, 97 kilometers from the North Sea. Hmm. The camp secretly uses the camp. The group secretly uses the camp to conduct Allied espionage and sabotage, and to help escaped Allied POWs from other prison camps via a secret network of tunnels. I remember that. I didn't really like the show that much. I mean, it was one of those shows that, if I'm correct, would play after Batman, right? Because that was the time slot. You had those after school time slots, right? I'd say starting from 3:30, it'd be something like educational-ish, dullish, or soap opera, and then bam, 4 o'clock, 4 p.m. after school, you have a lot of these uh, shows pop on your television, and you'd have your snack and do your homework. So a lot of it was sitcom comedy, Three's Company, Happy Days, and you had these other shows like that were getting older up in the time, like I Love Lucy and in the Flintstones, right? Which was like you don't even hear about them anymore. I hear they're trying to make a comeback, but anyway. So let's get back to this. So they use these tunnels. So I remember that, yeah, that operate under the ineptitude of Commandant Colonel Klink and his Sergeant at Arms, Sergeant Schultz. The prisoners cooperate with resistance groups collectively called the Underground, defector spies, counter spies, and disloyal officers to accomplish this. They devise schemes such as having Sergeant Carter visit camp disguised as Adolf Hitler as a distraction, or rescuing a French underground agent from Gestapo headquarters in Paris. To the bafflement of his German colleagues who know him as an incompetent sycophant, Klink technically has a perfect operational record as camp commandant, as no prisoners have successfully escaped during his tenure. Well, Hogan and his men assist in maintaining this record so they can contribute with their covert operations, considering Klink's record and the fact that the Allies would never bomb a POW camp. Starlight 13 appears to be a very secure location. So yeah, so that was a for a minute it was like let's look at the ratings, broadcast history, legal issues. Okay, so we did say that. Let's try this. Desilu, good old Desilu, Star Trek, Lucy Liu, right? Lucy Old Ball at the time. She was cool. She was very pro melanin. So it was filmed in two locations. Yeah, we got that. Although it was never snowing on the film set, right? So Jerry Fielding made a lot of hits. And like some of these people were as teenage. See, this is interesting, right? Okay, so the actors who played the four major German roles, right? Werner Klemperer as Klink, John Banner Schultz, Leon Askin, General Buchholter, and Howard Kane, Major Holstetter. Yeah, Holstetter. Were all Jewish. Furthermore, Klemperer, Banner, and Askin had all fled the Nazis during World War II. Kane, whose birth name was Cohen, was an American. Robert Clary, a French Jew who played LeBeau. Remember, yeah, he's a cool character. Spent 3 years in a concentration camp with an identity tattoo from the camp on his arm. His parents and family members were killed there. So it's interesting that with all of that, right? The irony of writing about it, but yeah, a lot of television was going on like that. I guess not everybody was down with it, right? Because I remember the show was on for a minute. My uncle liked it. He was from that generation. I had an uncle, but he was into country music too, right? Yeah, you had some uncles. I think some of us know. They're into the country music and they're into that. Yeah, all of this stuff. So let's say Otto. Yeah, son of conductor. Oh, so Otto, or actually Werner, is the son of Otto. There we go. Described as the last few. Okay. Fled Hitler's Germany with his family in 1933. During the show's production, he insisted that Hogan always win against his Nazi captors, or else he would not take part of Klink. Yeah, that makes sense. He defended his role by playing, I'm an actor. If I can play Richard III, because maybe, it was a bro, I can play a Nazi. Who can play, oh, what? Banner attempted to sum up the paradox of his roles by saying, who can play Nazis better than us Jews? What? Oh my God. I'm surprised that's actually, yeah. So, and they also, all these guys spent the real second, and so, yeah, and even during the war, there were, there were actors that, like Bob Hope. This guy used to do comedies. He used to go on tour, just like Dave Chappelle, right? But for the any war, well, yeah, he was. Believe it was more like the Second World War. He was still like a lot younger then, but the Second World War, when especially with him and Bing Crosby, they were a thing. They used to do like comedy films and all that in those years. Everybody got hit up on that whole venture, right? And so Bob Hope, being the comedian, he was brilliant, the punchlines and everything. This guy would go on every war with the troops and bust some serious jokes and make them laugh before they went out and served. And that was a World War II, Korea, even all the way up to Kuwait. I mean, it's relatively recent he passed, I would say. Like, I'm gonna check it. Let's check up Bob Hope in a bit, but it was Kuwait, the 90s. So yeah, that's Bob. So yeah, despite its international success as a parody, the series was unknown on German television for decades due to language barrier. Yeah. So that was one of the so-called, and I didn't get to see how it did Like they don't really give you ratings. Now this guy, you know, history is always interesting because you kind of look at the parallels, right? So now here we are in this what we call right vibe, right? Right wing vibe. And this guy who played the star of Hogan's Heroes, uh, Bob Crane, was murdered, right? So that because the show was popular and this guy he was known, right? I really didn't. I mean, I knew him from Hogan's Heroes, but he was yeah he had an enterprise. So this guy was big things, big names. Almost like the franchise that we used to see with like the Full House-ish type of thing, right? He was that guy. I don't know if we'd call him like America's dad per se, but maybe America's war hero veteran. Yeah, so 65 to 71. That's it, 65 to 71. And those were the years when a lot of stuff was going on in the United States, right? By that time, you had the whole Vietnam situation going on in full effect, right? And it was all straight through those years. So there was a kind of resurgence in the consciousness of the public to bring it back and say, hey, and of course the veterans might have been in their 40s, right? So yeah, he left and he did dinner theaters, and yeah, he was found bludgeoned. Let's go back. So Crane's career, because yeah, after that he received two Emmys. Crane's career declined after Hogan's Heroes. He became frustrated with the few roles that he was being offered and began performing in dinner theater. In 1975, he returned to television in the NBC series The Bob Crane Show. Yeah, for a minute, I remember. But the series received poor ratings and was canceled after 15 weeks. Afterward, Crane returned to performing in dinner theaters and also appeared in occasional guest spots on television. Crane was found bludgeoned to death in Scottsdale, Arizona apartment, in his Scottsdale, Arizona apartment. I'm just trying to read with my glasses here. Apartment while on tour in June 1978 for a dinner theater production, Beginner's Luck. The homicide remains officially unsolved. Yeah, and his previously controversial public image suffered due to this. Yeah, and I remember that, right? When that happened, yeah, so he was on the Donna Reed show, uh, Private Life and Murder. Yeah, so it was kind of, I mean, stuff was kind of out there. This was a good film, actually. There was one film, yeah, Autofocus, that was about that. But yeah, I remember, I mean, the tabloids, anyways, which was happening big time back there, back in those days, came out with these sort of scandalous reports. Yeah, he descends into a life of strip clubs, BDSM, and something with sex addiction, right? So there was something connected. I don't know what it was, but they said something along the lines, yeah, he was a sex addict and he was recording these encounters. So MASH was a satirical film. 1970 American black comedy, which is dark humor, not black comedy. War film, so that's something else. It's a film genre concerned with warfare, typically about naval, air, or land battles with combat scenes central to the drama. It has been strongly associated with the 20th century. The fateful nature of battle scenes means that war films often end with them. Themes explored, yeah. So it's a film genre, right? The Picture is the only theatrically released feature film in the MASH franchise, yes, and became one of the biggest films of the early 1970s for 20th Century Fox. So it's 1970 now, right? And Vietnam once again was in full effect, right? And so not only did you have the Second World War vibe going on with shows like Hogan's Heroes, you also had the Korean War right off the bat, ready with that, right? Vietnam was already in the news, so that's what was going on. So yeah, the film depicts a unit of medical personnel stationed at a mobile army surgical hospital. So that's what a MASH is. As I'm sure many people, maybe even like myself, yes, like myself, I didn't know MASH meant that. I always said it was, I knew it was medical something, but it's Medical Army Surgical Hospital. And they were conceptualized in 1946 as revolutionized units of ASG units, which were auxiliary surgical hospitals made during World War II, became obsolete. MASH units had 60 beds, circa, all of that. So the film depicts a unit of medical personnel stationed at a mobile Army Surgical Hospital, MASH unit during the Korean War. These were the original stars: Donald Sutherland, still in the house, and Sally Kellerman. That's actually recently passed away. Um, yeah, American actress. She was the character known as the original Hot Lips, right? So that might be some fodder for you kids out there that need to know who Sally Kellerman was. Robert Duvall and Star Trek guy here. Odo. Yeah, Odo was an actor way back since then, right? Rene Murat Auberjonois. Rest his soul. Gary Burghoff is still in the house. Yeah, Radar. He was the only character. He actually was one of those guys in the movie and then in the film. In the movie and then in the spin-off of the film. Yeah, Radar, Gary Burghoff, right? But all these folks, like life goes on, you never hear about them. And of course, yeah, you had Fred Williamson. He was the only black guy in the film. He even was in the show, if I'm correct. If not him, it might have been one of those other girls. But, haha. Vietnam War, also known as, I bet you didn't know that, Second Indonesia War. So this, see, November 1st, 1955 to the fall of Saigon on April 30th, 1975. So yeah, the film won a Grand Prix, the Grand Prix du Festivales International de Film, later named the Palme d'Or at the 1970s Cannes Film Festival. So that's cool. 5 Academy Award, including Best Picture, one Best Adapted Screenplay. A lot of screenwriters would mention that a lot of lessons, or if you even get mentored and you talk with producers, they'll say, yeah, read up MASH. I remember one of my mentor producer, I won't say any names, but very well known. He would always say, if you could write something like MASH, because I guess MASH also for the time was one of those, if you were able to make a hit film and then adapt it into a television series, you'd be doing pretty decent. I mean, not, I guess maybe not the ego of every director, but I guess for sure when you're talking about yeah, the industry of it. So MASH was one of those things, one of those shows that was able to adapt straight from film to television. So yeah, culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant, and recommend for preservation. So they're going to preserve this. Yeah, see, he's the only character, and so when this came out, now this became a television series, and in the television series, the war in the series lasted longer than the actual war, right? Which was 3 years, if you looked at it. But this war ran on for a decade within how they wrote the script and the situation. So 1951, 4077 MASH in South Korea. South Korea is assigned two new surgeons, Hawkeye Pierce and Duke Forrest, right? They used to say BJ Honeycutt, but I guess they changed. I guess they changed the name, right? Because I don't. Okay, BJ Honeycutt is the other guy, right? Because they replaced. This is Wayne Rogers, and he was the friend. Then they brought in another guy, right? And so yeah, he was playing Trapper John, Trapper John, MD, and then they did another spin-off, right? Which was Trapper John and Trapper John MD. So Hawkeye Pierce, but Duke Force, I guess, is the movie, right? So that would be the Donald Sutherland and Elliot Gould. So yeah, Painless Pole. So this is John Frank Burns. So there's it's funny because in the film they're showing you the television cast, and the cast is not at all who they are. What's this? Production. Were there any scandal? Well, this is interesting because also another thing about the film MASH was the first time we actually saw, and maybe this was, something to think about because it would make you wonder. Okay, so the Vietnam was still going on, right? Second World War was happening. When it came to making a comeback per se, nostalgia, right? Going in there by that time, 40, 20, 40 years for some, 50 for others, right? Depending how you look at it when you put in the politics and who's lived through the era. Anywho, no one had actually seen actors do surgery on television the way these folks made it look with the little tick 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 and they're tampering with the bins and the metal pans and they're pulling out like bloody stuff, right? Like blood and the person's screaming and don't cut my leg, huh? And all this. Yeah, they this was like one of those films that really went there. And then they brought that over to television. Imagine that, eh? Crafty folks, very crafty. So the screenplay by Ring Lardner Jr. is different from Hooker's original novel. So another thing, a lot of films are that come into be are adapted from books. So yeah, the screenplay in this case was based on a novel. And let's see, does it give us any an unfriendly witness? Yeah, the Hollywood 10. But we'll get back to him. He probably knew something. So Altman describes the novel as pretty terrible and somewhat racist. The only major black character has the nickname Spear Chucker. He claims that the screenplay was only used as a springboard. Despite this assertion by Altman, however, while some improvisation occurs in the film and Altman changed the order of the main sequence, most sequences are in the novel. Hmm, this is very interesting, right? When Radar steals blood from Henry, it's for Ho John's operation on the Trapper and Hawkeye's scalpels. When the surgeons are playing poker after the football game, they are resolutely ignoring Ho John's corpse being driven away. So yeah, this is the kind of stuff that they had. But if you get a chance to watch it, it still makes good educational, I guess, in the sense of how you can write tragic comedy because there was tragedy, right? There was a war, and but they were able to write it out for like double the time, right? With the actual television series. So and the song. Now the song was called "Suicide is Painless." This song was made in. It was a song for the movie. Johnny Mandel, Michael Altman, lyrics for the 1970 film MASH, in addition to being performed and sung by Ron Hicklin singers. Now the song is na 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 na. You hear it. Suicide is painless, right? The version heard under the opening credits was sung by uncredited session vocalist Tom Baller, with Ron Hicklin and Ian Freeburn Smith. On the single release, the song attributed to The Mash, the song is reprised later in the film by Private Seidman, played by Ken Primus in the scene which Painless attempts to commit suicide. So yeah, I remember, and if you've heard the song and you didn't know what it really was, that's what it was, right? So yeah, because of the context, the height of the American Vietnam War, 20th Century Fox was concerned that audiences would not understand that it was ostensibly taking place during the Korean War, right? So yeah, there you go. And so you had the movie. This is just a movie. We still haven't even. Wait, can we see what the show is? Full music. wonder if this, I'm just checking to see if this page spins off into that. Hmm. So that's interesting. We'll link directly into like the show, but oh, this is good. Some awards here. They won an award, most performed feature film standards. I didn't really know that. Okay, so let's see MASH the TV series. So once again, an American war comedy drama television series that aired, and this was from 1972 to 1983. So that's a full decade. I saw the last episode. I remember very well. It was very, yeah, if you're into the, I guess the melancholy. I used to like the series finales and all that. They're made to make you feel like, oh, they're leaving. So yeah. So this one, once again, follows a team of doctors and support staff stationed at the 4077 in Ujingbu, South Korea during the Korean War 1950 to 53. Though a number of challenges were made to the cast throughout the show's run, Alan Alda as Surgeon Captain Benjamin Franklin Hawkeye Pierce, and of course, this is the rest of the cast. Much of the show's variability in style and voice can be attributed to fluctuating writing staff over the life of the show and the variety of sources contributing to the story. So yeah, they were good for that, man. I could say this bro here, Mr. Olga, he directed stuff and everything. So the film was an attempt, after an attempt to film the original book sequel, Mash Goes to Maine. So that was the original book. So the book was based, okay, a novel written by Richard Hooker. Right, this is him, American writer and surgeon who wrote under the pseudonym Richard Hooker. So it's Heister Richard Hornberger Jr. And this known work was his novel MASH in 1968, based on his experiences as a wartime United States Army surgeon doctor during the Korean War. So this is always good to know backgrounds of folks, right? Written collaboration with this guy, Hines, a journalist. It was used the basis for, yeah. So this guy, this writer here, after graduating from medical school, he was drafted into the Korean War and assigned to the 8055 MASH units. According to one doctor assigned to the unit, weren't on the front lines, but they were close, yeah. They lived and worked in tents. It was hot summer, colder than winter. Operating room consisted of stretchers balanced on carpenters' sawhorses. Many of the MASH doctors were in their 20s, many with little advanced surgical training. During battle campaigns, units could see as many as 1,000 casualties a day. What characterized the fighting in Korea, one of Hornberger's fellow officers recalled, was that you would have a period of a week or 10 days when nothing much was happening, and then there would be a push. Suddenly be mass casualties that would overwhelm us. Yeah, that's pretty much how the show was, too. You saw that in the show. So, yeah. So these are the adaptations. So, once again, and he wrote sequels. Look at that. MASH Goes to Maine. Well, novels characters back in rural Maine after the Korean War armistice. It's kind of like Aftermash. There was an actual series for a minute called Aftermash. And what? Aftermash Mania. What's this? Mash Mania. So I guess this is probably like a follow-up, right? Swamp Gang Crossman. So let's get on to the rest of the news here. But yeah, this is something to do a little research about how, and these are a few of the books he wrote, actually. There's more than one. He wrote something like 15 books. So it just goes to show like how a lot of narrative and a lot of what we see out there is sometimes coming from what they call based on real life stories, and then it blows up to something else, right? I'd like to do a little research on a lot of the origins of these companies, but I believe we'll do that in another episode because that's so much to learn about how these companies did start. Yeah. And moving on. Today in the news, it's now 12:10 a.m. going on 12/11, 2022, March 13th. And we're just covering a little education here on bad actors, right? So we're watching what Hogan Heroes and MASH, the kind of vibe and energy that was put out there when we were kids, anyways, or as we would say, boomers and Gen Xers who came out. And yeah, this was one of the shows that came out, MASH and Hogan's Heroes, right? While I'm here, I want to give you a thanks and a shout out, and also give me a thumbs up if you please can, and please subscribe to the date, as this is my fourth show going out. Where once again we're getting into the groove of it. But my thing is just to educate and at least do my part into uh, helping the next generation, giving a chance of hope by sharing at least some of the old school lessons I've learned, and because there's a big gap in the history that obviously is going on now that allows, I could say, for everything that's happening today. It's all relevant. And if you were not, say, around, even up until 2000, right, 1990s, you just born, there's a lot of stuff that happened just even before and during your birth. And it's not to insult that you don't, know anything. It's just that I'm sure, it would be beneficial. Like I used to think when I was young, elders would always, give the best advice. When you get older and in hindsight, you look back, you're like, man, that person was right. So we don't have much of that these days, right? It's very, I find we have a lot of young people who are very like potent, and yes, we have the influencers out there, and they're telling you, and how we say, training you, personal trainers. Right? And I'm not, I gotta stop saying so much. That's a Canadian thing. Uh, Not to bring down the youth of today, but however, there is still so much more history that you can get out there if you research and you can actually link up and see how things add up and they always repeat themselves again, right? So recently, we haven't seen any war shows. We have seen, like I'd shown earlier, a lot of television series where you are almost sympathetic to the right cause, right? And it's like, for me, I find it hard to excuse any crime that pertains to taking life on a mass scale, and genocide or whatnot. War is not something to be mocked or shouldn't be funny. I mean, even if, and thus, even if it's tragic comedy, and tragic comedy is the root of what our entertainment is. I mean, we should be mindful because all those decades ago when this was cool, right? A lot of folks were laughing and ha 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 ha, and then you had the canned laughter. They couldn't even get real people maybe to participate in this stuff. And once again, they're kind of bamboozled, right? So yeah, so that was this guy. Tonight I want to give a shout out once again. Thank you for the thumbs up and subscribe. I want to give a shout out to a lot of mentors out there in this YouTube world. UIC Asaph, man, he is the bomb. If you want to get the straight up, candid, no holds barred lessons and blessings from this man of the great gathering of people at IUIC. Israelites, we are one. Yes, shalom. And of course, a gathering 144, very informative and once again blessed with the gift of teaching. I've learned so much from these young folks. I want to give a shout out. Also, thoughts scammer. Well, I guess I don't know if he wants to say it like thoughts camera action, right? Yes, bless. Shout out to that. To the gents and ladies out there and the IUIC classrooms. Definitely got to see that. Fly Nubian Queen, Dr. Claude Anderson. Please come out. Please come out and let us hear more. There's a lot of us who are taking in the nutrition of what you've been telling us all these decades. And I just want to say thank you, shout out. I highly recommend you tune into his channel because, yes, you got Powernomics, and he is the man who knows how to make it happen. So, Seji Hito, the second coming, blessings, Burning Spear TV. What should African people do about colonialism? We should learn. That's what we should do. Right? Your world, Sister Carrie Ann, shout out. Ayal Ban Ephraim Ban Yashahara. Yeah, I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'll do it once again. Ayal Ban Ephraim Ban Yashahara. Big up. Mitchie X, Tariq Radio, Dr. Umar Johnson, and even Sloan Bella. I've been watching these channels, and yeah, I literally got inspired to say, what? I'm learning so much. My brain's been bursting, and I got to share some info. So, shout out to all of you. And hey, if you guys can give me a big up, I'm learning this from scratch. All right. My background is I do have over 35 years. I did some film, television, acting, all this, studied in communications, even up to the .com time with the internet. And then, like everybody, I have my life to do, and you have your 30s and you hit your 40s, and things are kind of not what it's supposed to be. Anyone will tell you that. So here I am, this decade in the 50s, and I'm like, I have to put these tools to use because I've been out of the loop. And then when this whole lockdown and the whole pandemic, right? And I was working with the homeless and the folks who were going through addiction. Had a very strong interest for me and the psychology of it. So when I got laid off, there we are, right? So because of the choices we made, right? And unfortunately, I chose God first. So today in the news, as I'm seeing here, because I know the news can be hard to get these days, and I believe when folks are told to shut up and not talk and not believe and all of this stuff and blame game each other, it makes you guilty by association. So I'm not saying whether it be Russia who's in the wrong for starting this with the attacks, or whether it be the Ukrainians that, have the right to exist freely, however, without messing everybody else up who wants to be free, then we should be told the truth because people pay taxes and we have a right to exist, right? So this whole thing, my 2 cents in all of this is like, hey, at the end of the day, everything is without blemish. Everything is without blemish. Even myself. But there are extremes. So when you see, just like it was back in the Second World War and all of this, call it whatever you want. Call it colonialism. Call it capitalism. Call it, all of the things. Democratic approaches. Keeping secrets and then lying about them. That how long that can go on, we don't know. And I guess that's the whole thing about God, right? That when we're thinking about second comings and all of this stuff, right? Everybody said no one's been talking about the second coming for a while. The kind of language I've been hearing is, well, people are getting worried about getting nuked, but no one's and yes, we do hear about, let's say, that coming, the great coming, as we hear with the Israelites. What I'm saying is we're still moving in the world like it's okay, and we're listening and only choosing to listen to what certain forces are giving us. And that's dangerous because maybe it is. I've been hearing the term bread and circuses, and world is a stage, and it's all we're in the matrix and then in the hologram. And listen, as far as we should all be concerned, we should be concerned that one, we are able to feed ourselves, have shelter, and be healthy. At the same time, we should also have a very strong concern about what happens to us after we leave this realm, right? I mean, it's got to be good purpose to want to be on the good side of the afterlife. I guess some folks go on with belief that they're still going to get accepted in the afterlife on the good side of history. But it's a tough position to be in because a world leader has to think, okay, and if you put, let's say it's you and you're being attacked, your neighbor is attacking you, right? You've got to defend yourself. But if your neighbor says, hey, we don't subscribe to you, let's say, even though like we say, it's okay, you can play music after midnight, you could play it low. Doesn't mean you have to blast it loud, right? But if you're going to come over my house and kick in my door and tell me to shut it down, okay, that might be a problem. That's why I could see this situation with with Russia. However, at the same time, if that neighbor is still, like, hey, you're saying, look, you can play the music, and they're still blasting the music, and not only that, they're having a party, and not only that, they're inviting people over, and those people are actually, messing your world up, and you're like, look, and it turns out their neighbor are bringing like, for the better of worse expression, they're bringing some heavy shit in the party, right? They're bringing drugs, they're bringing guns, weapons, everything. It's far fetched, but here I am, the neighbor. I'm like, listen, you can do what you want, but maybe I just want to live and read my Bible and watch the Israelites. And we're not blasting it up to turn you off or get you upset, right? And hey, if they come over, they know enough respect to come in my home and chill, and that's what it is. However, on the other side, they're still raising hell. And not only that, they want to evict you. And they're like, you know what, we're gonna kick you out of your own place. Well, that's not fair. So when we hear about these talks, and this is where I'm going with all of this, it's about those talks. We hear a lot about these guys. We have to have talks. They've been having talks forever. It's part of the politics, right? Talks. What are you talking about? You call someone on the phone, what are you going to talk about? You can only say so many things. I can only imagine the conversation these guys have, right? Like, what one side is saying, well, you guys got these right wing extremists who are quote unquote the big NZ, right? And what they're saying, yeah, so what? We have a right to exist, and but when the other side is saying, yeah, but your history shows us that your approach is brutal. The other person can come back to say to even to the Russian side now and say, well, you guys have a history of being, such and such way, and then forcing people to live under this communist regime where they have no freedom at all, and you got to do so. But do the majority of the people there, are they still with it? And once again, that's according to what we're hearing outside of that. So here we are today. We had the telephone conversation with Olaf Scholz and Emmanuel Macron. So Vladimir Putin had a telephone conversation with the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, Olaf Scholz, and President of the French Republic, Emmanuel Macron. Okay. So they're still agreeing to talk, but in response to the issues raised by the leaders of France and Germany regarding the humanitarian situation on the territory of the military operation to protect Donbass. Vladimir Putin informed them of the real situation on the ground. In particular, the Russian leader cited multiple facts of gross violations of the international humanitarian law, by the Ukrainian army and police, extrajudicial killings of dissenters, hostage taking, and the use of civilians as human shields, deployment of heavy weaponry in residential areas in proximity to hospitals, schools, kindergartens, and so on. At the same time, nationalist battalions regularly sabotage rescue operations and threaten civilians when they attempt to evacuate. Vladimir Putin urged Emmanuel Macron and Olaf Scholz to influence Kiev authorities so as to stop such criminal acts. So, I don't know what anyone's saying about that, but that's what happened yesterday. Serbian president says country will not join NATO, recalls 1999 bombing of Yugoslavia. Now, there's another lesson there for you millennials out there. In the 90s, and of course, talking in my other post, there was a lot of war going on, just like the 70s, right? There was a new resurgence of this whole European wars, even, right? And even thus, in the period, they were talking about creating the EU and whatnot. Here we see Belgrade. Serbian President Alaskar Vučić said, or Vučić said on Saturday that the country will not join NATO after the alliance bombed Yugoslavia in 1999. Our opponents say that we must join NATO, and answer to them is that we must, and my answer to them is that we must not join NATO because we have our own army that protects our land and sky. Not far from here, they killed Milica Rekic, a 3-year-old girl who was killed during NATO bombing of Yugoslavia. Soon we will mark the anniversary of aggression, and we will not hesitate and we'll call it an aggression, not an intervention or a campaign, the Serbian leader said during a campaign rally in Vučić settlement. Yeah, so in 1999, an armed confrontation between Albanian separatists from the Kosovo Liberation Army and the Serbian army led to a bombing of what was then the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, consisting of Serbia and Montenegro, by NATO forces. The operation was undertaken without the approval from the UN Security Council and was based on the allegations by Western countries that the Yugoslav authorities were allegedly carrying out ethnic cleansing of Kosovo Albanians. NATO airstrikes continued from March 24th to June 10th, 1999, and claimed the lives of over 25,000 people, including 87 children. So, that's some history to look up in the 90s, right? Because those were the years, like Romeo Dallaire was talking about when he was one of our generals. Let me look him up real quick. Romeo Dallaire. So throughout the 90s, right, this guy was, he was the one who was our general. Let me double check here. So Romeo Antonius Dallaire, right, is a Canadian humanitarian author, retired senator, and the Canadian Forces Lieutenant General. That's it. I just want to make sure, because you could say general, but no, he's a lieutenant general. He served as force commander of UNAMIR, which is the United Nations Assistant Mission for Rwanda. It was established by United Nations Security Council Resolution 872 on October 5th, 1993. It was intended to assist in the implementation of the Arusha Accords, signed on 4th of August 1993, which was meant, since we're here, right? Which was meant to end the Rwandan Civil War. The mission lasted from 93 to 96. So what happened here? The Rwandan Civil War was a large-scale civil war in Rwanda, which was fought between the Rwandan armed forces representing the country's government and the rebel Rwandan Patriotic Front, a ruling political party in Rwanda. Okay, and the Rwanda Defense Force is the national army of Rwanda. The country's armed forces were originally known as the Rwanda Armed Forces (FARC), but following the Rwanda Civil War of 1994 and the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, the victorious Rwandan Patriotic Front, which is who we're looking at from up there, okay? Uh, let's just finish that. Yeah. So, but following the Rwandan Civil War of 1994 and the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, the victorious Rwandan Patriotic Front, Inkutanki, created a new organization and named it the Rwandan Patriotic Army, RPA, and the name that's the name. So, going back to this, the war arose from the long-running dispute between the Hutu and Tutsi groups within the Rwandan population. Right? It's a 1959-1962 revolution had replaced the Tutsi monarchy with a Hutu-led republic forcing more than 336,000 Tutsi to seek refuge in neighboring countries. So the Kingdom of Rwanda was a pre-colonial Bantu kingdom in East Africa which survived with some of its autonomy intact under German and Belgian colonial rule until its monarchy was abolished during the Rwandan Revolution in 1961. And after that, it became a republic, okay? So the revolution had replaced, and of course, forcing more than these 336,000 Tutsi to seek refuge in neighboring countries. A group of these refugees in Uganda founded RPF, which, under the leadership of Fred Wigjinya and Paul Kagame, became a battle-ready army by the late 1980s. So in all that time, what do you think they were probably getting all these weapons and whatnot, right? But this, I remember when this came out. So the war began in October 1st, 1990, when one party here, RPF, invaded northeastern Rwanda into the country. They suffered a major setback, and this guy here, Wigjinya, was killed. All right, let's see a picture of him in action on the second day. So it's a lot of history to read, but over the course of about 100 days, between 500,000 and 1 million Tutsi and moderate Hutu were killed in the Rwandan genocide. So this is what I wanted to get to, right? And so it occurred between 7th of April and 15th of July 1994 during this war. During this period of 100 days, members of the Tutsi minority group, ethnic group of the African Great Lakes region, Bantu speaking, second largest of three main ethnic groups in Rwanda and Burundi, right? So the estimates were around 500,000, 800,000 deaths, as well as some moderate Hutu and Twa, these are the tribes, right? The group of indigenous African pygmy tribes. And Hutu, also known as Abahutu, Bantu ethnic social group. So a lot of these groups seem to be more ethnic than what we're told is ethnic. I don't know, right? So this went on, look at that, 250,500 women raped, the studies, so the first Congo War, 1996, 1997. So there was a lot of warring going on in Africa that, in comparison, when folks would wonder and say, well, why is Africa the way it is? Well, if you were born shy of the, let's say, even up on the late 70s, early 80s, just enough to catch what happened before the war in the Middle East, you would see, wow, It wasn't just that. We're told it's just the Middle East, right? But it wasn't. It's Africa, a lot of places. And in the 90s, a lot of this was going on, and we had this kind of rhetoric. So Dallaire, who once again Lieutenant General Romeo Dallaire, served as force commander of this organization, United Nations Assistance Mission for Rwanda, the ill-fated United Nations peacekeeping force for Rwanda between 1993 and 1994, and attempted to stop genocide that was being waged by Hutu extremists against the Tutsi people and Hutu moderates. So he founded the Romeo Dallaire Child Soldiers Initiative to help prevent the recruitment and use of child soldiers. So these kids, child soldiers, this was something that for the first time started to come out. But children have been soldiers forever, right? It's not like war is only a man's game. We know if they're not the collateral damage, they are the ones who are out there. So he's born in the Netherlands and he became our guy. So he was really traumatized and he wrote a book about his experience, right? Several individuals attempted to halt the Rwandan genocide to shelter the vulnerable Tutsi, among them were Dallaire. And they couldn't save, I guess, as much as they wanted. Dallaire gave the major force contributors different evaluations for their work. In his book, Shake Hands with the Devil, right? This is what I wanted to find. So you could look into this, Life After Rwanda, and how he suffered post-traumatic stress disorder from his experience, and it's tough for soldiers. That's why part of this show is also to give big ups to our veterans out there, right? Because you go through war and you see people all this stuff, right? But he attempted to hurt himself by combining alcohol with right, raising awareness for mental health, right? But then we had comedy shows making fun of that, right? But as you can see here, it's clear that the killing of the peacekeepers formed a part of the widespread and systematic attack. So yeah, this was. He later worked as a special advisor to the government on war-affected children and the provision of small arms distribution. Didn't do so well after that, I guess, even in Canada, because we still we have some issues. But you can imagine from those days in the 90s when that was going on, and a lot of us who were coming of age, I mean, yeah, we were like, no, this is nuts. This is like this, the word ethnic cleansing happened, right? So read up on him, and but this guy uh, was there in the thick of it, and the original mission didn't go as it was supposed to. And let's look on January 11th, 1994, Dallaire sent his genocide fax to UN headquarters. The fax stated that Dallaire was in contact with a top-level trainer in the crowd of Interahamwe Armed Militia of MRND. The informant claimed to have been ordered to register all Tutsi in Kigali. According to the memo, the informant suspected that a genocide against the Tutsis was being planned, and he said that in 20 minutes his personnel could kill up to 1,000 Tutsis. Dallaire's request to protect the informant and his family and to raid the weapons caches he revealed was denied by the UN. The result was a genocide of between 500,000 and a million. 7 out of 10 Tutsis were killed. So he learned of the Hutu power movement during the mission's deployment as the plans for the mass extermination. He also became aware of secret weapons cached in an informant because his raid was turned down by the UN Department of Peacekeeping Operations, which felt that Dallaire was exceeding his mandate and had to be kept on a leash. Seizing the weapons was argued to be squarely within these guys. Yeah, yeah, blah, blah. Right? Tried to talk to the crisis committee, attempting to establish peace and prevent the resumption. Neither side was interested in a ceasefire. The government, because it was controlled by the genocidaire. So how can this happen in Africa, the continent of Africa, right? How could that happen? Ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing. The attempt to create ethnically homogeneous geographic areas through the deportation or forcible displacement of persons belonging to particular ethnic groups. And how do you do an ethnic cleanse? Ethnic cleansing is usually accompanied by efforts to remove physical and cultural evidence of the targeted group in the territory through the destruction of homes, social centers, farms, and infrastructure, as well as the desecration of monuments, cemeteries, and places of worship. So, this was a big term in the 90s that popped up when we were, you know, trying to make money and get the whole, the economy going with recessions in midst of what was going on in that era. So, as we see here, I mean, I'm looking this up to see where we are today because it seems that it's still going on, right? It constitutes a crime against humanity and may also fall under the Genocide Convention. So there is a convention that exists to prevent this, right? Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. It is an international treaty that criminalizes genocide and obligates state parties to enforce its provision and codify it. So they have to codify it. Even as ethnic cleansing has no legal definition under international criminal law. International criminal law is a body of public international law designed to prohibit certain categories of conduct, right? Many instances of ethnic cleansing have occurred throughout history. The term was first used by the perpetrators as a euphemism during the Yugoslav wars in the 1990s. Since then, it has gained widespread acceptance due to journalism and the media's heightened use of the term in its generic meaning. So there you go. So this mutual ethnic cleansing, I mean, and it goes back a long time, right? Andrapodismos, enslavement. So this goes back a while, the definitions of it, they rule it, but it's not really officially recognized. Most practices constitute crimes against humanity. The official United Nations definition of ethnic cleansing is rendering an area ethnically homogeneous by using force or intimidation to remove from a given area persons of another ethnic or religious group. As a category, ethnic cleansing encompasses a continuum of spectrum of policies. In the words of Andrew Bell Falkoff, ethnic cleansing defies easy definition. At one end, it is virtually indistinguishable from forced immigration and population exchange, while At the other, it merges with deportation and genocide. At the most general level, ethnic cleansing can be understood as the expulsion of a population from a given territory. So they all have their meanings, eh? This guy's like, okay, forcible removal of an ethnically defined population from a given territory and as but right? But there's no international treaty that specifies a specific crime of ethnic cleansing. However, ethnic cleansing in the broad sense, the forcible deportation of a population, is defined as a crime against humanity. So these are things that, and look at all these meanings. Population cleansing, the deliberate removal of a population with certain undesirable characteristics, such as its ethnicity, yeah, I always have ethnicity, its religion, its social class, its ideological or political criteria. Classicide is a concept proposed by sociologists. I'm getting tired. I'm really, and I can't see my screen properly here at home. Sociologist Michael Mann to describe the deliberate and systematic destruction, in whole or in part, of a social class through persecution and violence. Although it was the used first used by physician and anti-communist activist Fred Schwartz in 1972. So we have classicide, ethnic violence. I mean, there's so democide is okay, a concept proposed by American political scientist Rudolf Rummel that described the intentional killing of an unarmed or disarmed person by government agents acting in their authoritative capacity and pursuant to government policy or high command. Woo! Communal violence, form of violence that is perpetrated across the ethnic or communal lines. So you see, there's a lot of sides and, you know, forced displacement, ethnocide. Like it's pretty heavy when you see like ethnic violence, identity cleansing. That's another one I've heard is identified as confiscation of personal identification passports and other such documents in order to make it difficult or impossible for those driven out to return. Linguicide, language death, language extinction, right? Monoethnicity is the existence of a single ethnic group. It's the opposite of polyethnicity. Politicide, political cleansing of population. Wow. Eliminating categories of people in specific areas for political reasons. The means can vary from forced migration to genocide. Population transfer, religious cleansing, social cleansing. So there's a lot of cleansings and literally, that goes on in this world. And it's like, wow, you know, we carry on, right? But it's not new. These are things, I guess, that are learned, that were learned. If I could if I could stand to be corrected, in the time with the, when they were doing sacrifices and to Moloch, and right, because what else you're gonna do, right? Primarily in the book of Leviticus, the Bible strongly condemns practices which are associated with Moloch, practices which appear to have included child sacrifice, and I'm sure so much others, right? And these are the list of ethnic cleansing campaigns by some academic or legal experts. Not all experts agree on every case. We need fact checkers in that, eh? Particularly since there are a variety of definitions of the term ethnic cleansing. Did we not just see that, folks? Right? This side, something side, every side, all along the side. With, when claims of ethnic cleansing are made by non-experts, example, wow, that's deep. Non-experts, journalists or politicians, they are noted. So look at this. All the way back, ancient medieval, early. So this goes all the way back to Third Punic War, all the way to the 1950s, 60s, the 1990s, right? Remember we were just covering the 90s. Go forward. Yasser Arafat, Georgians, Balkans, Croatian Republic of. So all these places, Operation Storm, remember that? There's Operation Storm and there's Operation Desert Storm. The Kosovo War, ethnic cleansing. So, and you see this happening to people who appear as a Caucasian, like you don't see really it as a black white thing. So, what could be that cleansing that ethnic people are trying to wipe out so much? They want to wipe out this ethnic. At the end of the day, I still believe it's a black gene thing. They want to clean it out to make sure that they can get. And even if you are from, let's say, somewhere as far as these places here, you know, or even here, right? They really want to bleach out any residue of what could be, the Israelite tribes, blood, right? And roots. Look at that. And once again, who sets up these hijinks or these coups? Well, no need to say, right? Look at this one, 2003. Sinafasi Makelo, representative of Mabuti Pygmies, right? Told the UN's Indigenous People Forum that during the Congo Civil War, his people were hunted down and eaten as though they were game animals. Both sides of the war regarded them as subhuman, and some say their flesh can confer magical powers. Makelo asked the UN Security Council to recognize cannibalism as a crime against humanity and an act of genocide. What did they say about that? Right? Sudan. So it's unfortunate though, but it's important to look and look up the history. So recently, the war in Tigray has been described as an ongoing ethnic cleansing thing, right? Perpetrated by Ethiopia against ethnic Tigrays. So what's that all about, right? Ethiopia has also weaponized famine, and Ethiopia leaving 90%. What's that all about? And of course, yes, we know about this, and we don't hear enough about this. So yeah, so that's my thought on the whole ethnic cleansing. Feel free to look that stuff up because I haven't heard about it, and I'm glad recently, anyways. But we know that we're hearing that this age of bio-ish going on everywhere, right? Our methods of how this stuff goes on. So you have places like or whatnot, I guess we call them philanthropy people who do these projects. This is one of them. And the difference between ethnic cleansing and genocide. Once again, while ethnic cleansing, on the other hand, is not recognized as crime under international law, UN Nations Office on Genocide Prevention and the responsibility to protect, the lines between the ethnic cleansing and genocide can become blurred. However, when it comes to the international community taking action to mediate a crime, the difference between ethnic cleansing and genocide needs to be understood. So in genocide, killing members of a group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring out its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, forcibly transferring children to the group to another group. Therefore, under international law, genocide is punishable crime. Ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing is the process of removing particular groups from a specific area based on race, nationality, religion, and other identifying principles. Whatever that means, right? While ethnic cleansing doesn't, by definition, involve intent to kill a group, the resettlement of said people typically results in the loss of lives. Genocide, however, focuses on the intent to destroy, because at the end of the day, it's to destroy. Ethnic cleansing is considered a crime against humanity. It has not been written and signed in any UN treaty. Well, it should be. So they do not have to protect those who have fallen victim. Take heed to that, eh? That says a lot. The responsibility to protect doctrine says if a state is unable to protect its own population from genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity, then the international community must do something. And who are they? Well, Summit 2005. So there's that. So we just learned a little bit. So these folks here, I guess, is to address I guess, putting trying to get ethnic cleansing in the law books. I don't know. This we were the leaders of the most powerful nation. Congressional relations. Mobilize, educate, issue message. The world agendas. From the war to drugs and to the war on terror. Okay, folks. So yeah, that's something to check up. And it's now 1:06 a.m. We're almost wrapping up. It's of course March 13th, 2022. Some more, a couple of things I want to cover here. So we see an unholy alliance, links between extremism and illicit trade in East Africa. East Africa, which has experienced relative stability on the African continent, is considered a key security partner in the war on terror, is at a critical juncture as it struggles to recover from the ravages of COVID-19 pandemic. The region finds itself endangered in a struggle against extremism, crime, and corruption. Surrounded on all sides by potent terror groups, deeply penetrated by domestic and international crime groups, and undermined from within by corrupt members of its business, civic, and political classes, East Africa's fragile institutions face a dire threat. At the heart of this struggle is the persistent menace of illicit trade. Illicit trade exacts a terrible cost from East African society, corroding its economic and social structures, threatening precious wildlife populations, and leaching vital resources that could rightly be directed and rightly be directed to sustainable development goals. Political instability in neighboring countries such as Somalia, Central African Republic, and Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as northern Mozambique. Conflicts in these regions are sustained by a two-way traffic of illicit goods with East Africa. So, you see, it's a financer of extremism, funder of criminal enterprises, breeder of corruption. What are you going to do about it? We're going to make a counter-extremism project. So, yeah, check that out. Bennett Zelensky speak on the phone after Ukraine leader proposes Jerusalem summit. Yeah. Leaders discuss efforts to end war for over an hour. PMO says, meanwhile, Kiev defense minister warns Israel's reluctance to choose a side could hurt ties for years to come. So they spoke recently, and we must stop repressions against civilians. Asked to assist in the release of captive mayor of Melitopol. So there seems to be some slight, something sounds a little off there because it seems like they're getting some help, and then, like everywhere else, you're going to have maybe not everybody agrees on the same monolithic thing, but at the end, it's all about money, right? Details of Israel's mediation efforts have remained obscure. Saturday saw a top advisor to Zelensky deny a report that Israel had pushed the Ukrainian leader to accept an offer from Putin that would see Kiev make significant concessions to end Russia's invasion. But at the end of all of that, right, a fresh example came of this Saturday when Ukrainian Defense Minister Ovsky Reznikov warned that Israel's lack of a clear stance against Russia's invasion could cast shadow over ties between Kiev and Jerusalem in the coming years. Israel is showing an unexplained disconnect and reluctance to choose a side in the war in Ukraine, he said in a video shared on social media. This will cause a growing lack of trust for many years because we will win with you or without you. So yeah, and you know, a lot of I would say any big decision or anything that goes on, once it's, once it's backed by, Israel, you know you're going to be at least good. So we don't know whose side they're on. Israel has been seeking to avoid antagonizing Russia, which has a strong presence in Syria, where Israel carries out military action against Iran-linked groups. So stay tuned on that because it's still early. That was yesterday. All right. So, oh yeah, this came up. Claims of biological weapon plot. Yeah, Russia has accused Ukraine and U.S. at the UN Security Council of a plot to use migratory birds and bats to spread pathogens, raising alarm among other council members that the accusations could be intended to provide cover for future Russian use of biological weapons. We call upon you to think about the very real biological danger to the people in European countries that can result from an uncontrolled spread of bioagents from Ukraine, Nebenza said. And if there is such a scenario, then all of Europe will be covered. So this is making the news. I guess we have more to hear about this, right? Because not everybody's on board, and then you have some people who are like, want to hear more about this. So this guy, Izumi Akimitsu, said the UN was not aware of any biological weapon programs in Ukraine. So that's what they said. But from what I'm hearing, the language is different, right? These are the areas. So that's news there. China amplifies unsupported Russian claim of Ukraine biolabs. So China, okay, so it's getting a helping hand from China in spreading inflammatory and unsubstantiated claims that the U.S. is financing biological weapons in Ukraine. So the U.S. is refuting it. They have no information to back up the claim. Yeah, but it's still important, right? Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby called the Russian claim a bunch of malarkey. So he's saying that, well, they're lying. What they're saying is not true, and they're saying it in order to make the U.S. look like they're the ones who are doing it. Vice versa. Yeah. So this is serious. Let's look into it, and let's see how that turns out. I mean, you're going to go in another country and do that, right? And here's the thing: when I hear a lot about, when it comes to the information coming out, if this was not true, why would anyone want to take all that time to give you something and tell you something and all that? I guess people are just brought into the world this way, eh? You know? So Aristotle, everything's based on this guy, right? He was a Greek philosopher and polymath during the classical period in ancient Greece, taught by Plato, right? He's a Greek philosopher born in Athens during the classical period, founder of Platonist school of thought, and the academy of the first institution of higher learning in the Western world. School, right? The peripatetic school of philosophy. So his writings covers everything: physics, biology, math, everything, almost. It's interesting because little is known about his life. He was born in the city of Stagira, northern Greece, okay? His father, Nicomachus, died when Aristotle was a child, and he was brought up by a guardian. And at 17 or 18, he joined Plato's academy, right? In this academy here, 387 BC in Athens, 20 years before founding his own school. So that's pretty cool. But this is the thing. A third of his original. Where did he come from? Right? Little is known about his life. How is it that this guy pulls off all of this and we don't know anything about, okay, so maybe he was an orphan, or maybe he was, you know, all of that business. But I always believe in trying to find out a little bit more because that definitely shapes a person, right? And the fact that he was able to get all of this information and make all of this happen. Is any one person that genius? I wonder. Aristotle's views profoundly shaped medieval scholarship. The influence of physical science extended from late antiquity and the early Middle Ages into Renaissance and were not replaced systematically until the Enlightenment, intellectual and philosophical movement that dominated Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries. That's what we are. Well, that was the last movement before what we are, like this New Age thing. This is what it is now. Age of Enlightenment, that was literally up until the 20th century, and then some. Here, he influenced this. The conversations of Jewish and Islamic philosophy on each other's response to questions and challenges posed by Kalam, Aristotle, and Neoplatonism from this period, 800 to 14. So this person had all of that, and nobody knows where he came from. Almost Jesus-y, like, you have these, like, because we never hear about like much what happened during his teen life, right? We know of him as a babe, as a boy, and then that's it. You don't hear anything, right? Those are the years he kind of, then he, all of a sudden he's 20, what, 27, 33. That's it. So this guy wrote about anything and everything. I found this a very interesting part of their philosophy here. Argument for creation against peripatetics. Is it this one? Aristotle, the prince of the philosophers, demonstrated, the prince of the philosophers, right? Demonstrated necessary existence of the unmoved mover, and therefore the unity of God. But from the view which he maintained that matter was eternal, it followed that God could not be the creator of the world. Again, to assert, as the Peripatetics did, that God's knowledge extends only to the general laws of the universe and not to individual and accidental things, is tantamount to giving denial to prophecy. One other point shocked the faith of the Kellerman, the theory of the intellect. Hmm, intellect. Taught that the human soul was only an aptitude, a faculty capable of attaining every variety of passive perfection, and that through information and virtue it became qualified for union with the active intellect, which latter emanates from God. To admit this theory would be to deny the immortality of the soul. See this guy. So these guys are like, you know, throwing their own deal here. They thought that atoms possess neither quantity nor extension. Originally, atoms were created by God and are created now as occasion seems to require. So that was that. Bible verses about the wicked as we wrap up tonight. Once again, I want to thank all of you for tuning in. If you did, this is my fourth show here, and we're just trying stuff out, but at the same time, we're here to just bring you the update as to what's happening in the world. At the same time, give a little commentary on things as we see today. We do have the tools and the mechanism to do it. So I definitely want you to give a thumbs up and subscribe. And for sure, I guess I'll probably make it shorter, but it extended into well over like an hour or two now. And that's because I'm covering so much and I'm learning with you also, right? So if it is a little too long, let me know. And if, maybe I'll cut it a little shorter. But yeah, there's so much to talk about. There's so much to look at with all this information, right? So just as we wrap, I always want to cover some of these things, verses about the wicked, because there's so much wickedness going on, right? As Deacon Asaph of IUIC says, we have so many wicked black people out here, right? Like precious white people, we care about you too. But it's those wicked black people who are not getting together enough to make things happen for the black people. Yes, it's true. We can't change the way people are brought up. I think we live in this world where we're like, oh, we got to change people from being like racist, and people are born how they are born, and at the end, that's got to be something they got to deal with God. However, when you are wicked and you're doing something with the intent to hurt and harm, and you're conscious of it, it does make a special kind of person to sustain existing like that, right? You got to be in a lot of pain, or you're probably really hurt. You're really damaged, right? Like we were seeing earlier, I mean, we laugh at We can make parody on war, right? We can exaggerate stories on war through television and all of that, but we never, the reality is it's nothing to be really laughed at. It's there's the tragic comedy, even that whole what that philosophy brought, tragic comedy with our great thinkers and like Aristotle poetics, right? Is it an act? What comes out of these people's minds with all the wars we've had, ethnic cleansing, this aside, that aside, coming from the wicked? Job 21:28. For ye say, where is the house of the prince, and where are the dwelling places of the wicked? Job 21:30. That the wicked is reserved to the day of destruction, they shall be brought forth to the day of wrath. I'm just going to kind of read them out. Hast thou marked the old way which wicked men have trodden? Yet he filled their houses with good things, but the counsel of the wicked is far from me. They reap his corn in the field, they gather the vintage of the wicked. Let mine enemy be as wicked, and he that riseth up against me as the unrighteous. This the portion of a wicked man with God, and the heritage of oppressors, which they shall receive the Almighty. And I break the jaws of the wicked, and plucked the soil out of his teeth. Not destruction to the wicked, and a strange punishment to workers of iniquity. Who goeth in company with workers of iniquity, and walketh with men? To say, a king, thou art wicked, and to princes, ye are ungodly, he striketh them as wicked men in the open sight of others. My desire is, Job may be tried until the end because of his answers for wicked men. He preserveth not the life of the wicked, but giveth right to the poor. But thou hast fulfilled the judgment of the wicked, judgment and justice take hold on thee, that it might take hold of the ends of the earth, that the wicked might be shaken out of it. And from the wicked their light is withholden, and the high arm shall be broken. Look on everyone that is proud, and bring them low, and tread down the wicked in their place. Oh, let the wickedness of the wicked come to an end, but establish the just. For the righteous God trieth the hearts and reins. In Psalm 7:11, God judges the righteous, and God is angry with the wicked every day. That's heavy, man. I'm gonna go right through. Psalms 9:5. Thou hast rebuked the heathen, thou hast destroyed the wicked, thou hast put out their name forever and ever. Psalms 9:16. The Lord is known by judgment which he executeth. The wicked is snared in the works of his own hands. Agan Salah. The wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God. The wicked in his pride doth persecute the poor. Let them be taken in the devices that they have imagined. I like this one because they imagine these devices. Psalm 10:2. The wicked in his pride doth persecute the poor. Let them be taken in the devices that they have imagined. Like snares and traps. Psalms 10:3. For the wicked boasted of his heart's desire, and blessed the covetous, whom the Lord abhorred. The wicked through the pride of his countenance will not seek after God. God is not in all his thoughts. Wherefore doth the wicked contemn God? He hath said in his heart, thou wilt not require it. Break thou the arm of the wicked and the evil man. Seek out his wickedness till thou find none. For lo, Psalms 11:12. For lo, the wicked bend their bow, they make ready their arrow upon the string, that they may privily shoot at the upright in heart. 11:5. The Lord trieth the righteous, but the wicked and him that loveth violence, his soul hateth. Psalms 11:6. Upon the wicked he shall rain snares, fire, and brimstone, and an horrible tempest. This shall be the portion of their cup. 12:18. The wicked walk on every side when the vilest men are exalted. From the wicked that oppress me, from my deadly enemies who compass me about. Psalm 17:9. Psalm 17:13. Arise, O Lord, don't disappoint him. Arise, O Lord, disappoint him, cast him down, deliver my soul from the wicked, which is thy sword. You got a lot. And what it says in all of these Proverbs and Psalms is that we know there is a wicked. And a wicked is not just like a person, but wickedness is what is learnt and is coming from that evil that is trained or ingrained, right? Because being wicked is, you got to act to be wicked. You got to be physically. It can come from your mind, like we quoted, in the imaginations, right? And how intricate and how detailed some of these folks can be. Psalms 141:10. Let the wicked fall into their own nets, whilst that I withal escape. Psalm 145:20. The Lord preserveth all them that love him, but all the wicked will he destroy. Psalms 146:9. The Lord preserveth the strangers, he reliveth the fatherless and widow, but the way of the wicked he turneth upside down. 147:6. The Lord lifted up the meek, he casteth the wicked down to the ground.
Be careful out there. That arm is unstable. Not sure how long it's going to hold. There's warning lights everywhere. Abort! Abort! We've lost comm. Look out. It's out of control.